Hello, I'm Xiaoling, and in this episode of What's in the Box, we'll be taking a look at the PC version of Farcry Primal. For those of you who are wanting to see the options and performance in the game, you can check out the other video that I made on the channel for more details. And for those of you who don't know what Farcry Primal is a first-person, open-world sandbox game with some elements of crafting, scavenging, some light RPG mechanics like leveling XP, and a skill tree system. So the game is set in 10,000 BC, quite a change from the previous games in the series. You play as Takar, a Wenger who is the last one left alive of his tribe after a hunting expedition goes wrong. And before dying, one of your clansmen asks you to find the land of Oros and reunite the Wenger people. Now there are two other clans in the game that you come across. The Oldham, who are basically a tribe of man-eaters, and the Izila, who are sun worshippers and for some reason like setting people on fire. So throughout the story, you're going to be battling up against these two clans, and it's basically up to you to lead your clan to victory and save the Wenger people. The story itself was nothing spectacular, run-of-the-mill I suppose. It did the job of pushing the game forward. The character designs were pretty good in the game, especially for the shaman. The other NPCs all looked the part as well, but for some reason in my time with the game I just didn't feel any connection with Takar, the main character, or any of the other NPCs for that matter. They are all fully voiced and they did a good job with the language itself, but for me, I'm not sure whether it was the setting or if it was just because the dialogue was relatively simplistic. I just didn't feel that I connected with any of the characters in the game. The characters just weren't as interesting as the previous games in the series, especially the antagonists. They were basically just cookie-cutter bad guys who didn't have a whole lot to say. So to summarize, if you're looking for a deep or meaningful narrative, you're not going to find it here. And also the story itself is relatively short if you just decide to rush through it. The graphics for this title are very good. They've done a fantastic job with the visual design and artwork, I think. It looks the part, it feels the part, and you really feel like you're out in the wilderness in a place before civilization where every manner of predator may decide and try to make you its lunch. No laws, first come, first serve. There are large open stretches of nature, rock outcroppings, flora and fauna everywhere, rivers, lakes. It's all very believable. And at times it felt like I was on Endor, except that I was in 10,000 BC. And there were some sections with massive redwood trees, and overall I think it all looked really good. The nights especially I found quite atmospheric with the glow of the moon off the water, the various lighting effects and the mist that sort of added an eeriness to the environment. There was some variation within the zones, but the majority of the map is not vastly different and will start to look similar after a while, with the exception of the snow area up in the north and one other area which appears more dry than the rest. Forest will be forest, I suppose, nature will be nature, but I think that the variety of animals and plants keeps things from getting too stale. You never get the feeling that you've just run through this field 30 seconds ago. Well, not entirely. I was, however, a little bit disappointed that there were no weather effects in the game. This is something that I would have added a great deal more atmosphere and immersion in my opinion. It seems like a strange omission, especially since there is snow falling in the snow biome in the north. Some rain, storms would have gone a long way. Perhaps it's a limitation of the game engine itself. The animals otherwise are also well animated. They behave like you would expect. The predators hunt in a believable way, with the more harmless creatures kind of roaming around in packs. It was quite a sight to see the eagle swoop down and catch a goat, drop it on a rock and sort of eat it after that, or to see a saber-toothed tiger pounce onto the back of a large prey and bringing it down. But all in all, visually the game is a treat, and they've really managed to create what feels like a living, breathing ecosystem. The character models and animations are good as well, fitting with the world that they've created here. So can we really talk about the visuals without talking about the audio of the game? These two things really go hand in hand in creating great and believable atmospheres in games. The sounds of the animals in the wild, or the background noises and ambient sounds, were very convincing. The rivers, the eagles flying above, and the predator growls, the yells of the enemies and the tribesmen in combat all did a good job, I think, in creating a good atmosphere. Just stopping to listen carefully to the sounds around you can actually tell you a lot about what's lurking nearby, especially in the night when everything is much quieter. The dialogue is decent, voiceovers are believable for the most part, with the exception of one NPC who's just outright sounds out of place.
Ooh, man. Now, Shash, why bow? Yeah,
like a Texan who's managed to travel back in time and learn the Wenja language. So I'm not sure what was going on there. The sound effects as well were adequate. They did enough to convey the weight of impacts when getting hit. However, I think that the bow sounds seemed a little weak, and there was little to no variation between the different bows when shooting. The music in the game was fitting but minimalistic, but there weren't any sort of orchestral soundtracks here or anything like that. And with that said, it seems like a glaring omission that the options menu in the game, the sound options menu in the game, consists of no volume sliders, with the exception of master volume and music toggle on and off. And you know, that's really disappointing indeed for a AAA $60 title. So let's talk about the gameplay. Arguably the most important aspect of any game. With bad gameplay, no matter how good your game looks or how good it sounds, it's not going to be fun. So the question is, how does Farcry Primal do in this respect? Well, I've spent around 16 hours with the game so far, and I'm still playing it, so obviously I'm enjoying it. But that's not to say that everything here is rosy, because it's not. There are a few things that are somewhat disappointing, and there are a few things that are just downright odd. Now, let's start off by saying it's a Far Cry game. So it's an open world sandbox game with lots of busy work. There are collectibles to find, there are new locations to discover, random encounters, side missions, which you get from NPCs that join your village, and some village missions as your village increases in size, and of course the main story missions. And then there are the bonfires, which are Primal's version of towers, and of course camps, because, you know, what kind of Ubisoft game would this be without those? So there's a lot of content here. If you just rush through the story, it won't take you too long, but again, that's not what open world games are about. They've always been about wasting time doing all kinds of side activities in the game, and then tackling the story missions every now and again. This has been the formula for pretty much every open world game in recent memory, and Primal is no different. The map itself is pretty large, and filled with lots of activities you'd expect to find in a Far Cry game. However, I was quite surprised to learn that the topography of the map was taken from Far Cry 4. So for a AAA $60 game, this seems a bit odd. I mean, it would be understandable if it was an expand-alone, but for a full-price game, they couldn't make their own map from scratch. At any rate, if you've played any of the Far Cry games, this is going to be more of the same. If you're expecting something different or something new, you're not going to find it here, and you're going to walk away disappointed. This is Far Cry, but in 10,000 BC. Now, that's not to say they haven't added some new mechanics in the game. They're just not very in-depth, and they're just not very fleshed out. So you have weapons and equipment that can be upgraded, ammo that needs to be crafted, ingredients that need to be collected so that you can heal yourself with the various food and medical recipes in the game, and so on and so forth. If you want to be able to carry more ammo, you upgrade your quiver. If you need more pack size, you get more animal skins. And this system is pretty much identical to the other games in the series. And also, as you upgrade stuff, each subsequent level of upgrades is going to take longer to acquire because it's going to require more of said ingredient, or it's going to require rare versions of said ingredient, which are basically random drops, if I can say that. And so upgrading stuff will take longer and longer as you progress further into the game. Also, throughout the adventure, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to do missions to bring more special NPCs into your village. Each NPC gets a plot of land in your village where a hut can be built and upgraded 2 times. Unlocking the NPC and upgrading the hut gives you more weapons and equipment to choose from, as well as a new category of skills in your skill tree, which can be bought with skill points. And the skill points get more expensive as you progress up each tree, and you get 1 point for each time you level up. And that's pretty much the gist of the system. The skill tree system is pretty much the same as you'd expect to find in any Far Cry game, almost a duplicate in some cases. The majority of them are passive skills that increase your run speed, the ability to craft more than 1 arrow at a time, when using more, without using more resources, picking up more resources every time you scavenge, have the resources to display on your map, have more health bars, and so on and so forth. There are some new skills like the Beast Mastery tree, which allows you to tame specific beasts in the game, and also get access to an owl, which for all intents purposes is a drone, which can be used to scout and mark enemies, drop bombs on them, and that kind of thing. But again, these skills are all passive, and I'll talk a little bit more about the pets later in the video. Now, none of these skills add any new special abilities to the game, and the reason I even mention this is because the combat in the game is pretty simple, and you have a very limited selection of weapons and items to use. So there are 4 types of clubs in the game. You have 3 one-handed ones, 2 of which you have access to normally, 1 two-handed one, which can be used to attack enemies in an arc, and the final one-handed one can be unlocked via the Ubisoft club. No pun intended. You have 3 bows, spears, 2 types of shards, which make up your 3 available combat items that can be thrown, and that's pretty much it. And so you may be saying, well, that sounds like a large variety of stuff, and yes, on paper it does seem so. But the problem is this: beside the fact that all the clubs feel exactly the same, with the exception of the two-handed club, a club is a club is a club. The one-handed ones are fast and do less damage, and the two-handed one is slow and does more damage. Yep, pretty much what you expect to find in any game. But there are only 2 attacks in the game. Left click for a normal attack, hold left click for a strong attack. And the clubs can be thrown at enemies to stun them as well. So no matter what club you're using, beside the fact that it feels the same, the strategy you use is going to be the same. Throw your club, stun the guy, run in, hit as many times as you can, back off, run around, rinse and repeat. Or don't throw your club, run in, hit as many times as you can, back off, rinse and repeat. There's no dodge, there's no block, and there are no special moves. And the bows suffer from the same problem as well. They all feel pretty much the same. One is normal, the second one zooms in more, and the third one fires 2 arrows instead of 1 and therefore just does more damage. And there's no reason to use the single arrow bow over the 2 arrow variation when you have it, because toward the end of the game, by the time you get that bow, you're going to be just doing a lot more damage with it. So that narrows it down to, you're going to use the bow that zooms in more, or you're going to use the one that does more damage. And then we come to the spear, which there is only one that can be upgraded, and it's the same as the club. It has the light attack, and it has the hold left mouse button attack, which is the lunge. But again, it's best used when thrown because it does the most damage that way, and should probably just be saved for harder encounters in the game. Now, understandably, because of the setting of the game, Primal is forced to stick with the traditional and believable weapons and equipment for the time period, which, in itself is fine. I think they've done a fantastic job to stick to their guns, but because of this, the weapons and equipment lack the variety and flair found in the other titles in the series. And they've not added any more layers of depth or interesting mechanics into the combat to account for that fact. And I think that after a while, it starts to feel very stale. It would have been nice to see more depth added in the melee system, with blocks or dodge or special moves or something like that, or the ability to craft different types of arrows or traps, which are coincidentally only ever used at beast hunts, and of which there are only 3 in the game. It just seems that they removed all the variety and left a big empty space, and after a few hours it definitely starts to show. Yes, you can set all your weapons alight so that when you hit enemies or objects they catch fire, because the spreading fire system is still in the game, or as a way to ward off predators at night, or even as a light source in caves. But outside of that, there's not much else. So the majority of my time with the game has been spent using bows. Headshots are instant kills unless the enemy has head armor, and like the other Far Cry games, this awards more experience for completing camps without being detected. So you're encouraged to do everything stealthily because you get a massive XP bonus for it, and so of course you wouldn't do that. And I do think this is inherently a problem, because it only encourages one style of play when attacking camps. And this is a sandbox game, and the game should encourage people to try various approaches to each situation without players feeling penalized because they're not doing something the specific way. Now, getting XP in the game is not a problem. There are many ways to get XP, and you'll have no issues getting all the skills that you want to get. There's also an option to reset the camps, I suppose, which is a nice addition. So the other big part of the game is scavenging. You'll be doing a ton of scavenging. You'll use your hunter's vision to highlight items that you can use, or you'll check on your minimap if you've unlocked the prerequisite skills, and you'll be running around from tree to rock to flower to animal carcass to bag to scavenge whatever you can. You even have inventory in this game, so you can go ahead into what they call the pack menu and see what you've got. Now, I've never used a screen, not once, while I was actually playing. I don't see the need for it. I don't like the way that it's laid out, and honestly, I just don't see any purpose. This game doesn't have a meaningful inventory management system like some of the other games, so there really is no motivation for me even to load up the screen and have a look at this. Either I have the maximum amount of something, or I don't. So when you're scavenging something, you get an on-screen prompt that tells you to hold E to scavenge, and this takes about half a second. So if you have the search animation on, it'll take about an extra half a second, so maybe a second or so for you to search through something. My advice to you is disable this immediately, unless you for some reason just like wasting your time. You will be doing so much scavenging in this game that you'll eventually be scavenging while sprinting past items because it saves you time. And while we're talking about scavenging, here's something I found quite annoying. If you scavenge something, only after you've scavenged it does the game tell you already have the maximum amount of what item you've just collected, or have just tried to collect. It's almost like they want you to waste more of your time continuously holding E to collect stuff you've already got. I mean, strangely enough, when you mouse over a bag located somewhere in the wilderness or one of the travel packs you find hanging on poles, when you put your mouse cursor over it, it actually tells you, no, you already have the maximum amount of this item. So why they chose to not have this display when you mouse over normal scavengeable items is absolutely beyond me. So speaking about annoying things, when you start getting people into your village, you unlock the ability to get a reward stash, which you can then take stuff from each day. The larger your village, the more stuff gets sent to your stash each day. And at first I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. It means I don't have to scavenge as much. But no. Unfortunately, the way this is designed is just awful. And let me give you an example. If I click on my stash, it shows me all the material that have items in their stack in color. The ones that are grayed out have nothing, obviously. But there's no way I can see which of these items I have the maximum amount of in my bag. So I need to mouse over each of these stacks. So I mouse over it, you can see how many it is. I can see on the right hand side how many my bag has. If I want one of these items, I can left click once. Or if I want to put as many as my bag will take, I can press space. And then I can move my mouse cursor to the next one, or I can use arrow keys or WASD. And I basically have to go through every single one of these items, one by one, to see what I need to put in my bag. This kind of micromanagement adds absolutely nothing to the gameplay. And whoever designed this and thought it was a good idea, it's not. This is tedium ad nauseum. Why not just have a button that says transfer items to backpack, which then moves everything that's in the stash into my backpack, save for the stuff that I already have maxed out. Is it really necessary to design a system like this that wastes people's time this way? Seriously? You know, if this was something you did once in a blue moon, fine. But this is an integral mechanic in the game. Every day you have to come and collect stuff from your stash. So yeah, that's why I'm bringing this up. You're going to be doing this a lot. So the addition of animal taming was probably the most interesting system within the game. You learn taming skills from the shaman, which when unlocked allow you to tame various predators within the game world. You throw down bait, the animal starts eating, you walk up to it, hold E, tame it, that's it, pretty easy. Each pet serves three purposes. It can be ordered to attack a specific target during combat, or it'll attack whatever target it wants if you haven't given it one. It'll defend you if you get attacked, and it'll deter any animal below it in the food chain from attacking you. It basically scares them away. So any animal to the left of your current pet, or in the tier below it, will no longer attack you. And finally, each animal also has a unique ability that is active when the pet is with you. Some will spot enemies, some will collect resources, and the rare variations of each pet will be basically resistant to fire. The larger pets like the brown bear and the saber-tooth can be ridden as well, which help you get around the world faster, with the exclusion obviously of the fast travel points. You can acquire skills to ride a mammoth as well, which is pretty cool. And later in the game you get access to beast hunts, of which there are only 3. You have to actually set traps and hunt the beast, get their health down to 0, and it's quite a fight. And I'm sure at harder difficulties it will definitely be quite challenging. And only once you've gotten its health down to 0 does it become your pet. And I thought that was just very cool. But again, unfortunately there were only 3 of these events, and it would have been nice to go through a similar but perhaps an easier version of this kind of taming for other pets as well. Again, I feel like this system could have been more engaging, and it was kind of disappointing that it wasn't. And also in the beginning, when you start the game, there's a real sense of danger as you enter Oros. You have no idea what kind of enemies will be present or what manner of predators are lurking around the corner looking for their next meal. And there's really a good sense of unease, which is even more apparent at night since there are more predators roaming around. The nights though are pretty short in comparison to the length of the days. And once you get your first pet, the sense of danger subsides pretty quickly. You know, the bears and lions are pretty scary at first, but it doesn't take very long before you unlock the tougher pets that will just chase them away. And at that point, the game goes into easy mode. Especially once you get your first saber-toothed tiger, nothing is going to attack you anymore. You can walk around anywhere you want during the day or in the night and fear no attacks from predators. Now, many people have said that playing the game on hard is a better idea since normal mode becomes easy too quickly. And I will add that I have been playing on normal mode, but we'll talk about that toward the end of the video. Otherwise, the AI for the game seems okay. The predators will try and sneak up on you, attack, run, flank, and come back, that kind of thing. They'll run away if your pet scares them off. The actual human enemies behave like they did from every other Far Cry game. If you stand in their line of sight too long, they see you and they'll attack. Hiding in a bush or behind a tree breaks the line of sight, and it's not long before they forget they ever saw you and, go back to what they were doing before. With regard to bugs and issues, I didn't come across many issues in the game, but there are a few that I think deserve mention. The first one, which I mentioned in my other video, was the inability to actually load the game the first time I installed it, because the game was unable to authenticate with the Uplay server, and I actually had to uninstall Bitdefender because turning it off didn't help, nothing else helped, and run the game so that it could authenticate to make Uplay happy, and then I had to reinstall Bitdefender. Ridiculous that this issue was even present in the final release. People shouldn't have to uninstall their antiviruses just so your game can verify once. So SLI doesn't work correctly either. It does use both cards, but if you're running on an SLI setup, disable one of your cards. You'll get a better performance on higher detail settings. On a single 970, I get the same frame rate on Ultra with shadows and geometry set to high as I do on low with two 970s. So this is an issue that needs to be fixed. We're going to have to wait for Nvidia to release a proper SLI profile. There were a few occasions where I was unable to feed my pet, and a few instances also where the pet got stuck in the geometry on the map, and I had to dismiss it before it worked again. And there was one instance where my owl was also unable to attack a target. But outside of those, I didn't come across any crashes or anything like that. The game seemed basically very stable. So all in all, I found Farcry Primal to be a little bit disappointing actually. And no, not because it's a bad game, it's actually quite fun, but because it lacks variety. It's really a shame that they didn't try to add more innovative systems and combat mechanics into what was an otherwise great setting. They removed the weapon variety but never replaced it with anything meaningful. You have a living, breathing world that's so believable, but with no interesting survival or hunting mechanics to be found anywhere. So it seems like somewhat of a wasted opportunity in my opinion. I suppose to its own detriment, it stuck to the Far Cry mold to the letter, and I do feel that it suffers because of it. In its defense, it does say Far Cry on the box, so, what did I expect? There is something inherently enjoyable about roaming through the wilderness in 10,000 BC, and not having to follow any kind of story, and just existing, scavenging, and discovering new things, trying to survive, along with your saber-toothed tiger at your side. But, eventually the repetitiveness will start to set in when you're doing X for the 100th time, with nothing really to show for it, except it'll tick in a box that says you've collected one more of said item, and gotten 1% closer to 100%. Some have said that playing the game on hard, without any HUD, is the way to go, and maybe that's something I'll try at some point. If you're a huge Far Cry fan, and you just need more of that Far Cry fix, and you need it now, then you probably won't regret purchasing this at full price. However, for anyone else though, I feel that this game is best picked up on sale, but should definitely be picked up at some point, especially if you enjoy the gameplay loop found in these types of games. It's not a bad game at all. It's, just nothing new. Anyways, that wraps up this video. Hope you enjoyed it and thanks for watching. I've been Chowling. Until next time. And we're running the game settings on the Ultra preset. We can see that the frame rates dropped down to 39 at the lowest point, currently sitting at 48. Not particularly great, to be honest. In this video, I'll be talking a little bit about the PC Hitman beta and my impressions of it. If you're interested in seeing what options are available in the PC version,